So you've heard of a victory garden and you want to start one, but you live in an HOA. Well, today on Wild Florida, we're going to talk about victory gardens versus homeowner associations. Hi, I'm Jacqueline, the Wild Floridian, and welcome to episode 9 of this 9-part series where we go from a lawn to a victory garden in a snap. See, victory gardens are all about increasing food security, decreasing costs in a time of crisis. And if this is your first time joining us and you want to start from the beginning, go ahead and click on this card right here, or you can wait till the end of the episode and the card will appear in one of these 4 corners. Okay, let's go. Let's talk about victory gardens versus those homeowner associations. So just like last episode, big disclaimer, this is not presented to you by the law firm of Wild and Floridian. This is just me, my opinion, and things I've researched. So yeah, this is not legal advice. Just my thoughts. Okay, we'll get into it now. Okay, I'm really excited about this topic because, well, I don't live in an HOA. Well, not really. We have a homeowner association, but it's not like what people think of. It's actually just homeowners who get together and we talk about things that are going on in the neighborhood. We throw block parties. It's totally voluntary. And we work on things like, oh, people were speeding through the neighborhood. So we worked with the city to get an assessment about, like, do we need those speed humps? All good things, all good things. But that's not the way most HOAs are. Actually, like, you have to be part of them if you live in that neighborhood. So we need to talk about what's the law versus the HOA. Why do people even want to live in HOAs? And then if you live in one and you want to have a victory garden, what do you do? So if you guys remember in last episode, we spent a lot of time talking about the law versus victory gardens and residential agriculture, right? And we talked about 2 great examples of California, right? They weren't right, they're left. They were working on greater social issues, right? Trying to allow people to increase their food security, decrease their costs, and then allowing people to have residential agriculture and, of course, victory gardens. And then you have Florida, right? They're right, yeah. And they were a Republican at the time, and they were trying to protect personal property rights and say, hey, get off my lawn and let me grow what I want to grow, right? And both ended up at the same place, allowing us to go and grow our victory gardens. Yay! But then we hit that spot where it was like, but maybe not in HOAs? Because see, in both of these states and in other examples, they may legalize you to have residential agriculture, urban farming, or victory gardens, but actually explicitly state that HOAs are allowed to have their own rules outside of it. So while they're regulating cities and counties and states from going in and infringing on your right to grow your own food, they are not going to circumvent or go around your homeowner association. So herein lies our problem. So why do I care? I don't live in an HOA. Who cares? But I know some of you guys do. So of course then I care, right? Because I want to help you in a time of crisis. Or maybe you're not in a crisis and you just want to grow food. Either way, we're all good. We're going to go and talk about it. But there's some stats we got to talk about, right? We've talked about 80% of the land east of the Mississippi is privately owned. And we've talked about the #1 crop in America is grass. And not for agricultural needs. No, this isn't to feed cows and sheep. This is lawns. We spend a lot of money, a lot of resources, and we take up a lot of native wildlife land to grow lawns, which is just generally aesthetically pleasing. And therein lies the problem. Because now that we even have states making the change to go and say, hey, other governments, systems, whether they're city and county, can't go and infringe on your rights, we're gonna totally let HOAs go and do this. So we need to go into this a bit more. And the other reason why we need to care about this is because, well, here's the thing. In 2017, 61% of new homes were built in HOAs, which means if you want a new home, the odds are pretty high. Even if you didn't want to live in an HOA, you're moving in. You're moving into one. It doesn't matter whether you want to grow food or not. Now, of course, you could go and buy a house that's not an HOA. Always an option. But that may create issues. Depends on where you work, how long you want to commute, what school systems do you want to be in. Because guess what? Hey, HOAs tend to be near the good schools. So, you know, there's people move into HOAs. I mean, I don't live in one, but maybe you do. And there's lots of reasons. I mean, I don't want to sit and act like you're crazy for moving into an HOA. Why would you do that? Buy some old house and like just do whatever. Okay, right? I get it. There are good reasons to. I mean, if you have a condo and a townhome, it absolutely makes sense, because really HOAs started to go deal with the common, everybody owns it, but nobody owns it. So what do, right? I mean, think about it. In the condo, like if the roof needs to replace, who pays for that? Or like if the elevator's broken, who pays for that? Who calls? Who has to go make sure maintenance is being done on that? And then if you live in places like, I don't know, these newer neighborhoods, there's usually a pool or maybe a playground or pathways and lots of common grass areas, more grass. And the fact of the matter is, like, who needs to make sure that's taken care of? And that's where HOAs step in, right? They allow for there to be a lot more amenities and structures that you don't personally have to take care of, but you pay a fee and you're part of a contractual agreement that allow for these things to continue to exist and you benefit from. And the number one thing for having an HOA is, well, hey, it drives up property values. Not even by a little, but by a lot, like 4.2%. So if you bought a house for 100 grand and there was a house for 100 grand over there, because you're in an HOA, your house may sell for 104,000 just cause. Now, there's the offset of the fact that, you have to pay fees and stuff like that, and you have to go and deal with a lot of rules. So why do they have all these rules? Well, I mean, the way that they keep up the aesthetic appeal is they're trying to deal with the gray. I mean, there's the more obvious nuisance ones, like it smells bad, or it sounds loud, or it's just like creating unsafe hazard issues for my neighbor, to aesthetic appeal, which is, isn't beauty in the eye of the beholder? And apparently we all like grass a lot. So, they're trying to give you some black and white instructions in a very gray range of what looks good. I mean, you have people's houses where you're like, yeah, take a picture of that, put it in a magazine, and it is beautiful. To the house needs to be torn down and I have no idea what's going on with their yard. We've got problems over there. And then there's this whole gray area in between. And the best way to go and deal with it is to create very clear boundaries of, you can grow this, you can't grow this. Your tree can be this tall, not this tall. Your shrubs can be this tall, but not that tall, right? And then all of a sudden we have the look that creates a higher value for your property. And of course, this is important. This is why HOAs tend, on average, to be able to sell 4.2% higher than houses that are nearby. They've got amenities and they just look darn good. So if they're well managed, it can be a great thing to live in an HOA. Until you want to grow a victory garden and you can't. Or maybe you can. So let's talk about that. So we're going to get into 7 things that you can do to work with your HOA or around your HOA to have your victory garden. But I'm gonna give a quick bonus one. Let's talk about collective action. So this is not what you're gonna do as an individual. This is what you're gonna go and do, because shouldn't we lobby our states? I mean, if we went through all that effort to get a state law in place, why would we give HOAs a pass? Especially since there's so many of the new homes. We need to allow for all the citizens to have the right, personal rights, and for the greater good, whether you're Democratic or a Republican, doesn't matter. It's important that people are allowed to grow food on their property. So number 1, let's talk about checking out some legal documents. Let's check out our Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, also known as the CC&R. This is what you signed when you got into the HOA, right? It's that rule book of what you can do, what you can't do, how high your tree can be, what color paint your house should be, maybe what shingles are on your house, all sorts of stuff. And you may already have in those laws and bylaws or rules or whatever the heck they call them, they already say you can have a vegetable garden. So do that first, because why get into a battle over something where the battle's already won? You just had to have a little bit of knowledge. But probably not, and so we're gonna have to keep going through this list, because maybe it does allow for it and it's in your side yard, your backyard, but it gets 100% shade, so you really need it in your front yard, and usually that's where the problems lie. Whenever we get in the front yards, people got problems. But some nosy neighbors will have problems even inside and backyard, so yeah. Okay, let's keep going. So number 2, go and figure out how strict is your HOA. Are they kind of go with the flow, or are they checking to see how tall your grass is? If it's not exactly 2.3 inches, every Friday they will be measuring. They will be letting you know and giving you a citation notification, and you'll be fined every week until it is in compliance. So you gotta know that. And the way you can know that is paying attention. Well, one, you can get to know the board members of your HOA, or you can also get a feel for, are people getting a lot of citations? Is every little thing, were they taking a ruler to your mailbox and making sure it was perfectly straight? Or maybe were they over there checking with swatches to make sure your house was just the right color? I mean, if they're doing that, like, you know, they're strict. But if people tend to push boundaries across the neighborhood on lots of things, well, then that gives you a clue that they probably are going to allow you to push some boundaries. So feel that out, figure out, are the board members strict or pretty loosey-goosey? Now, just because they're loosey-goosey today doesn't mean that when the next board comes in, and I don't know how often your elections are, that it couldn't change over to here, where they're going to go crazy and take over everything, and you're going to have a whole list of things you need to fix right away. So number 3, you need to build a network within your neighborhood. You need to find out, and that's how you're gonna get information about how strict they are. It's not gonna just be by looking around. It's go and find out. They'll give you a lot of information on who's on the board, how strict are they, have people tried stuff before, were they okay with it, were they not okay with it, or maybe they were okay with it but not a certain part of it. Like maybe they were okay with there's tomatoes but they didn't like the fact that there were bananas. And so you go like, well cool, I only wanted to grow tomatoes, so I'm gonna probably be okay and I can get going on the sly. So try to get information. Really in the beginning, it's all about information. What do they like? What do they not like? What will they try to fine you for? What will they not? And what are you allowed to do? So yeah, number 3, build a network. So number 4 is about petitioning. That's right. You need to check out your CC&R and figure out what are the rules for creating a petition. Because see, what's written into law can always be written out, and the same goes for your CC&R. Things can be changed. And even if they can't be changed, exemptions can be approved. And then the process for doing that is usually through some sort of petitioning. So you have to usually get like a certain number of neighbors to sign that they agree that they want either a change to the rules or that they want to allow for you to have an exemption. And I don't have personal experience with this, but my mom does, because at one point my parents owned a house with an HOA, and my mom wanted to paint the house with this like red firehouse brick color, which is very not Florida, but it was violation of the HOA rules. So she went around and she petitioned to all the neighbors to say like, don't you think it looks good? I think it looks good. It looks good. You should sign this so that I can keep having my house look good like that. I really want it to look like that. And a lot of people were like, whether they thought it looked good or not, they didn't care. They're just like, yeah, it's fine. I'm cool with it. And they signed the petition, and all of a sudden her paint color, which was not like any of the other paint colors in the neighborhood, was approved. So same idea, take that concept, petition so that you can get your victory garden in your yard. Number 5, hey, here's a crazy idea. You know who has to enforce those rules, and you know who approves the changes to the laws or exemptions once even there's petitions and enforces those things? It's the board. So here's a crazy idea. Why not be on the board? And then you can go make the change, be the change you'd like to see. I know, it's a crazy idea. It's a long-term play, but it's one that you could do. So go ahead, serve on the board, help the greater good of the neighborhood so that you can make it more the way you think it should be and get what all the neighbors want to. Yay! Yep, I think my mom, after she did the paint color, she had to serve on the board, or she didn't have to, but she did. She did that for years, and now they live in a condo, and I think my dad's on the board too, because he's always having to deal with fixing the elevator. Because the reality is being on the board comes with great unlimited power, but also with great power comes great responsibility. Remember, Spider-Man said that, or someone. Number 6, we're going to use the law against the HOA. That's right. See, there are sometimes ways to go over, under, and sideways of those HOA rules. It's okay that Florida Senate Bill 82 didn't give us the right to go and restrict an HOA so we can grow our food, but maybe we could use native plants to go around them. That's right. Sometimes states or counties or cities have laws about being able to plant native plants or plants that are friendly to the state. And the whole idea is because of droughts and overuse of fertilizers and pesticides. And if you live in Florida, this is a big problem. If you've heard of red tide, yeah, a lot of it comes back to the overuse or just the use of fertilizers and pesticides, and the state is trying to get a handle on that. And that's where Florida Senate Bill 720.3075 comes into play. It's all about allowing people to grow, even within HOAs, Florida native plants and Florida friendly plants. So Florida Senate Bill 720.3075 is all about being able to reduce the use of fertilizers, reduce the use of pesticides, and allow to have more drought tolerant plants. And the best way to do it is the plants that natively grow here, or ones that we call Florida friendly, which just means that they can live in very similar conditions that naturally happen in Florida without the use of overwatering and pesticides and fertilizers. Make sense? Makes sense. So what does that have to do with your victory garden? I know, I gotcha. So how do you know if it's native or Florida friendly? Well, for Floridians, you can go to ffl.ifas.ufl.edu. That is the University of Florida's website that specifically lists Florida friendly landscaping. Now, is this an all-inclusive list? I don't think so, because it has about 1,000 plants, but there are other plants that I know, just because I know about native plants and I've been learning a lot, that I did not see on the list. But it's a great place to start. And a lot of HOAs may use this as a reference on what they can and cannot approve. And if you've got similar laws in your state, there are usually connections to some sort of university, like in Michigan, the University of Michigan may keep a master list of what is recommended as friendly to the state. So look for your home state to figure out if you've got that too. So for my Floridians, what are some native plants that you could be growing? Well, have you ever heard of papaya? It's native. How about sea grapes? Native too. Or how about muscadine grapes? If you've ever had Florida wine that's made from muscadine, that's the grapes they come from. Or how about beautyberry? Some people say it has medicinal properties. Birds love it, and you can eat it. I hear people make a jam out of it also. So check those out. Or how about Florida friendly? I looked on the list and I found some things that I was surprised they had on the list, but hey, all the better for us. Things like bananas and loquats and jaboticaba and natal plums, all Florida friendly and on the list. So now you're saying, yeah, but I don't live in Florida. I'm watching your video, but I don't live in Florida. Well, I got you covered, because see, actually I started researching this a long time ago because I was having a problem growing some food in my yard, and I started down this like logic exercise of first, things that will grow well in my yard are probably native. So what's native to the United States and the Americas? So I went and figured that out. And then from there I thought, well, then I'll figure out what's native to Florida and then I'll grow that. So let's talk about what's native generally in America, because maybe that could be even used. I'm gonna read from the list a little bit because it's a long one. And I'm gonna put a link below to one of the master lists so that you can check that out, because there's a lot and I'm not gonna list them all. We will be here all day. Ready? And a lot of these, when I started listening and thinking and reading them, I was like, oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because that's like what is in American cuisine. So let's talk about them. How about pumpkins and blueberries and cranberries and squash, 27 varieties. And what about corn? That's very American. And what about, let's check the list. Pecan or pecan, which one do you say? How about wild rice and sunflowers and sage and echinacea, also known as coneflower, and maple, so you can make maple syrup. Or what about white walnuts and black walnuts and acorns and beach plum and red mulberries and pinto beans, and what else did I have? Elderberry. Oh my gosh, the list was really long and then I stopped writing. So lots of things are native to the United States, and we already have them integrated in our diet, which makes them even better for us to grow them. So check out that list so you can get some other ideas. It also help you, have bigger yields, because they want to grow there. They like to grow there. They were growing there before we tried to go and cultivate them. Awesome stuff. Go and make it happen. So now you're pumped. You've got this list. You're like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. But here's the thing. A lot of times those laws, they say that HOAs need to approve them, but they might have been like, yeah, we're just not gonna have, you can have Florida friendly, but not bananas and not loquats. Because they still may need to prove it. And I was reading up on it, and there haven't been a lot of cases to challenge this, so we really don't know how it would play out. So again, use the other things that I've talked about, like petitioning and trying to get to know people and building a base and all that. So that gets us into number 7. Go rogue. So you're gonna go rogue. All right, here we go. See, here's the good thing about the bad thing. See, the bad thing is most people don't grow their own food. But because of that, that means most people in your neighborhood won't realize you're growing food, because they don't even recognize it. So there are 2 strategies that we want to use when going rogue. Strategy 1 is we want to mimic the aesthetic. The second one, hide it. Hide it behind, hide it between. So let's first talk about strategy 1. So strategy 1, we want to mimic the aesthetic. Look around the neighborhood. What is the look? Is it a yard with then a hedge, and a hedge, and then a tree? Or is there a tree ringed by hedges, and then we have flowers at the base, or maybe we have trees and then we go straight to flowers? You got to understand what are the patterns that they're creating so that you can mimic them with food plants. You hear what I'm saying? So then what you do is you say, if they want me to have a tree and then they want me to have a row of bushes, maybe I can swap out my bushes with some blueberries. And look at the type of shrubs that are already approved, right? What do they look like, and what might be, from a distance, you couldn't really tell the difference. So like a shrub might be like a natal plum. And I know people don't recognize this. We had some in a median on the road nearby here, and I wanted to try one without buying it. And I was like, hey, they have that over there. I'm gonna go pick some. So I had my husband one day, like a crazy person. I just jumped out of my car with him there, and I was like, just keep the engine running. And I ran up and I grabbed some. And some people outside were doing a walk, and they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, there's natal plums here. Yeah, so you can start swapping them out. Take a look at the pictures, try to figure it out. So here's an example, like hibiscus, right? They are big bushy plants. They have those great beautiful flowers on it, and the leaves usually look like this, right? Now you may just end up having a hibiscus, it just never flowers, and the leaves look like this. And unless you get really close, you wouldn't notice that there are berries on it. Yep, this is an ever-bearing mulberry. And from a distance, can look very similar to hibiscus plant. So getting to know some plants that you can just swap out may be the solution. Also think about like ground cover, right? A lot of people won't recognize sweet potatoes. I've had sweet potatoes in my yard for almost a year now, and I've got neighbors who know I'm growing food, and they'll say, hey, what are you growing right now? And I'll say, sweet potatoes. And they'll go, oh, in your backyard? And I'm like, no, right here. And they're like, where? And I'm like, right here. Like right here, right where I'm standing. They're like, where? I don't see sweet potatoes. They don't recognize it. It happens all the time. People can never believe, or even the stuff they know, tomatoes. Just had this with a neighbor the other day, really nice. He said, hey, but why aren't you growing tomatoes? I'm like, there's tomatoes here, 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 and here. And they're all over the place. So also think about tomatoes, right? If you already have some trellis plant that's allowed to grow, just let your tomatoes start running up in between them. It probably won't be very obvious that they're in there. If anything, people might notice and think it's a weed and say like, hey, you gotta get that weed out there. And that might be the worst of it. So some things that are gonna definitely stand out are things like lettuce. People tend to know what a head of lettuce looks like. And things that get really big and bushy that don't have similar things like broccoli or kale or spinach. There's not a common thing that you can swap out, but if you're allowed to grow daisies, why not throw some coneflower echinacea? They wouldn't even recognize it, I'm sure. And they'll just go, oh, those flowers look so beautiful. And then what about ground cover? I'm gonna tell you right now, ornamental sweet potato is like taking off as an ornamental ground cover, and just like ornamental bananas, I don't know why we have them, but we do. So go ahead and put actual sweet potatoes in your ground and swap them out. Oh yeah, and that's another thing, is I do know some HOAs that approve ornamental bananas, because I have someone I'm friends with at work who, they said they got an ornamental banana and the HOA approved it. I couldn't. I was like, why? Why? So try to swap it out with an actual banana, you know, that you can eat. Oh man. All right, the second strategy, it's all about hiding. Just hide it. Put it behind it, put it between it. That's what you need to do. See, if they can't see it, then they can't fine you for it or tell you that you're breaking the rules. So if you got a hedge and then a hedge and there's some space between, go ahead and put some carrots in there. Or maybe put some heads of lettuce, or let the tomatoes vine along, or put some pepper plants. Just go crazy. Hide it all behind there. Get it in between. All sorts of good stuff. And you know what? You're in a time of crisis. And I know YouTube's gonna penalize me for sending you away from YouTube, but I gotta help you. So I wanna tell you about the outlaw gardener. I think her name is Christy. The last name starts with an S. I don't remember it. I'm gonna give you a link below. She lives up in Virginia. I think it's in zone 7A, 7B, and she lives in HOA. And for years, she used techniques to create that aesthetic appeal and hide plants. And she does an awesome job of giving you all these tips and tricks. So go and check out our website so you can get a lot more specific ideas of how you can go and integrate food into your yard. Yes, go and do it. Yeah, go rogue. Okay, so we've covered the 7 things that you need to take those dukes up and fight that HOA and get your victory garden in. But we got more to talk about. Not with victory gardens, but I've got a whole lot of other topics. So to make sure you don't miss them, go ahead and like, subscribe, and ring that bell for notification. New videos each week. On Tuesdays, of course, we always dig deeper into growing food on the Growing Food is Easy Challenge series. And of course, we give you the in-depth look into how to grow food in the Growing Food is Easy series. We talk about native plants on the True Florida Native. And we're gonna have some other series where we're gonna look at some landscaping design and some other great topics. So I'll see you soon. Bye.